the evening after that. You guys are nearly there, right? So yeah, now we're Niantic Spatial. We chopped off the games part. These Pokemon Go anyway. Okay, so we're talking about flexible prototyping. My name's Joel Schroyen, pronouns he, him, game designer, currently at Niantic Spatial. Next. Focus. Next. When I was writing this, I thought, actually it's about efficient prototyping. Flexibility is a way of getting it. So this is me in 1995 when I was 7 years old. Dressed up as Hobbs from Calvin and Hobbes. It's probably not Halloween, it's just a Sunday. You know, playing Theme Park from Bullfrog, because I always like to play games, and especially games where you build stuff. So just quick backstory, I worked at Grinding Gear Games in 2011. Through Path of Exile release, I was the sole level designer there for 4 years until I worked at Magic Leap, which is good, showing you a video there. Magic Leap is a mixed reality headset where you can look through. It doesn't have like pass-through cameras like the Quest 3 does now, so mixed reality is cool again now. But back in 2015, I mean, they hadn't even had the headset then. It took a few years before they built it. But we built a game where you shoot robots with ray guns that climb out of walls in your real room. But the thing I sort of worked on the most was like this puzzle that comes out of your wall, and you tinker with it, but it's physically reactive, so you try to push through it. Around. And then in 2020, we formed NZXR with 10 other colleagues. We did Destination Mars with Pedro, who was here earlier, which is like a experience, audience participation, theatre experience. Everybody has these little tablets. Did anybody go to Destination Mars? One. There was some shows here. Okay. And then we did a contract for Qualcomm Snapdragon Spaces, which was another XR headset that you plug into your phone, and we didn't know if there was going to be a controller. So we assumed you could have at least a button on your phone, and we know where the headset is. So what we came up with was a crane claw game that you have on your head. You press a button, the claw goes down, and you pick up a piece of cake that's like physics and floppy, and you try and make a tiered cake just with your head. And then in 2022, we got acquired by Niantic. Worked on these cool properties, Pokemon Go, Transformers, and Peridot, and then shipped into the Scaniverse at the end of last year, which is like anyone in the world can use Scaniverse. No, what is it called? Scaniverse? Yeah, Scaniverse, yeah. It's on your phone, so go get it. And you can do 3D photos. You do a little scan in place, you get a 3D photo, upload it to the cloud, and then you can put on your headset and view it in first person. And browse around the world. And I've got some prototype pictures of this later. Shortcut that. So here we're here to talk about prototyping. Why you prototype, what a prototype is. But first, caveat, I haven't shipped any games in like 7 years or so, but I've been doing XR prototyping for like 10 years now. Worked on maybe like 50 prototypes minimum. I'm not an engineer by training, just by self-taught. So I'm more of a designer, and most of the examples are in Unity. Sorry, developers. So let's get to the meat of it. Games are dynamic. You play them, you don't read them, so you can write all the documentation in the world you like, but until you play it, it's you don't know if it's going to be good. You're going to build something. But games are tricky. You don't know, first up, how well it's going to play. The thing in your brain, once you put it into the game, they're so complex you can't predict what the outcomes are going to be, and what the outcomes are bad. We also have a limited budget, which we always think about money, but it's usually time. You're paying for your own time, you're paying for somebody else's time. So we take all the unknowns, that's the risky part. We want to reduce our risk, so we end up with a good product at the end. So we take the biggest risk, make a fast experiment, and call that a prototype.
Sorry, don't really need the microphone close to it.
Yes, I can. It was uncomfortable hearing myself. And then we do that again and again. Because each time you make a prototype, you learn something new, and you make it better, and you do it again and again, talking into the mic as good as you can, hearing yourself. And then eventually you'll totally get to perfection, right? It's a straight line. Anyways, so the more loops you can do, the better game you'll get. Speed and quantity will result in quality. We all know Rimworld, right? So we start with the design of making your prototype. So when you're making a prototype, you're going to pose a question. It's your clarifying thing that will make your job easier. Just a really way of figuring out what you're going to be building. While you're building a thing, you can look to that and know what you're building, and at the end, you'll know what you built compared to the original question and how well it compares to that. They'll keep you on track. So like looking back at the earlier things I had there is, like with the Invaders example, the mixed reality Magic Leap example, just what kind of mixed reality puzzles can we make with some examples of questions? Or what kind of gameplay if you've already got a headset and no controller, you've got to figure out what to do with that. Or how can I show 3D scans on a map? So for Into the Scaniverse, which is a great name, we didn't name it. That was marketing. Blame them. We wanted to figure out, you got all these user-generated points, so that you could have one person could go ham and put 100 points on the same spot, and somehow you have to be able to browse it. So I made this little toy, which you just sort of like the metaphor is like a flashlight. You flashlight it over top using your 6 degrees of freedom VR controller. Things pop up and it feels good. Nice little game feel kind of thing. Or maybe they float around just like soap bubbles. Think about who the prototype is for. It's not always just for yourself. And the customer is not necessarily the person who's paying money at the end. I'm just talking about the person who's paying for your game at the very end when it's all finished. I'm talking about the person who's the prototype is for. And it totally affects the shape of the prototype, because if it's just for you, you can fill in the gaps, you know everything that's going on. But if it's for a teammate, or if it's especially for an investor who doesn't have any experience in games, they're not going to know what the hell they're looking at and be really confused and distracted. So think about what they can imagine. Can they imagine the finished product? Do they get hung up on what they see literally in front of them, or are they able to sort of bridge the gap and understand, like, it's not all about grey cubes for real? Can they just deploy a build? Like, do they have a VR headset if they need one? Do they have the right play space? And often, in my experience, you just end up delivering a video anyway. Maybe a few people will play your build, but most people will just look at the video and be like, cool job. Think about what's going to be represented. So you just really want to focus on the important parts and not put much high detail into all the unimportant parts, but we'll get to that. So over the school holidays, to have children, we got a nice family road trip to Rotorua and Hobbiton. You can go inside Hobart Holes now, which is pretty cool. And in the evenings, I tinkered on a little game project, and I wanted to see what it would be like if you could just go through a forest. See, there's no forest, and just dig up the hill and lay train tracks and just go around. So you can see here, I'm just using this is like default Unity terrain textures. I only put the textures changing on the ground because when I changed the height, you couldn't perceive the change. So I was like, I have to go through a great effort to just put different texture on the ground. Different tool, which is just like a cube. I know that I'm holding something, it does something. It's a pickaxe, I guess. Just know that just jumping forward, digging some more, and then, oh my God, it changes. You got a different tool. It's laying tracks now. I don't know what the hell. And I was just using the spline package artwork that just came with it. And I'm also just pretending that there's rules saying that, you can't just put tracks wherever you like. I'm only allowed to put tracks on the flat part. But I'm just pretending because I'm the customer for this one. I can just fill in the gaps and not actually have to code all that stuff. If you had an investor playing this thing, they'd be like, why does the train go straight up a hill? That's very unrealistic. Okay, some tools to prototype with. So when you're building your prototype, you can start with the toy. A toy of the prototype. A toy is something that's interesting to interact with on its own. It doesn't have any game rules around it, obviously. It allows open-ended play and it's sort of reactive. It has an input and then there's an output. And it's a good way to get something fun early on, and you can build your experience around that. Like a ball is a toy, football is a game, but a ball is the world's best toy because everybody loves balls. But excuse me, pretend that you didn't hear. But some examples of toys in video games is like the Jump in Mario, right? You press the button, but it's not just, it's a big PA. You get a big, when you press the button, you jump up, but in Mario, it's like, how long do you hold the button up for? Are you moving beforehand? You move in the air a little bit. It's a really nice little toy. and you don't even need a level or anything else. You can probably play that for a while. But some of the early examples is just like browsing discount crystals, picking up and dropping floppy cakes. Yeah, those are toys that are in the games around them. Thinking about the visual quality, choosing appropriate visual quality. Because more art, more scope is more time, and it's hard to adjust later because you want to go for efficient quality. You go on a fast loop, you get more loops, and you get a better game to perfection, right? So some strategies for visual quality, you've seen some of them earlier today, like grey box and blocking things out, just using primitives, cubes. If you're able to edit geometry in your editor, it's way faster than having to do like an export loop through Blender or whatever. And this is into the scanner burst is like the first thing. Maybe you're in a hot air balloon in space. It's a space hot air balloon, by the way. But you've got the box, you've got the wires, and I've actually stubbed in some extra wires here because in VR, everyone knows there's motion sickness problems. If you have a large object moving in front of you, your vestibular system is like, hang on, you're moving, you're not standing still. So we went for like the cockpit sort of framing things, just really thin, just enough that'll sit in your view. So your vestibular system is like, okay, you're watching something else move. For some reason, the Earth is like moving and you're a static hot air balloon in space. Placeholder art is a really good way to get some good velocity in there. The train that I had in my hobby project, futuristic looking train was great, but I don't want a futuristic looking train. I wanted something else, but it's better than a cube. It just gets the point across. Or you can get some Cinti art, which is made here in New Zealand, by the way. And they have huge amounts of packs. You just get the right amount of pack, get some widgets in there, at least you know what you're sort of looking at. But once you start doing that, you have to watch out that the level of art in your game will become lumpy. You'll have a grey cube over there. You'll have some generic textures over here, and then a really high res like vase in the middle. And if you've forgotten who your customer is, like the investor will be like, this vase. Why is this a game about vases? Like, no, it's about the grey cube you're supposed to pick up over there. One way to address that, I guess, is if you just get some more Cinti packs, because all their art packs are in the same art style, and you just fill out the whole game all at the same level. But that's extra work, that'll slow down. Or you don't even have to be working in the game engine. You can use something else and just sort of mock it up. We use Shapes XR, and this is like the first day we were working on Into the Scannerverse. We're like, okay, you'd be browsing points. It'd be cool if you saw them on a planet. But the planet is like big. What if you put it on your table and it's like a mixed reality experience, and your friends can, I don't know, stand around it with their own Quest 3s. Not that many people have Quest 3s. Let's see. Yeah, just testing how you put points on the map. Like you can actually see the end result has the little points on the map, but instead of being a table on the ground, it's a fully immersive thing. But you could find that out pretty quick. And that was like the first mock-up. I really wanted the 3D scans to be small and you could like browse them, but we had to just go for a boring cube map in the end. Or Figma is really good. Figma's good for like doing UI designs, but you can also have a prototyping mode where you have just different screens and you pretend the button is the right button. You click on it, it just takes you different screens. You get the feeling of going through things. Or you can play act. I like this video. We actually shipped this thing. Is it going to play? I think I have to press the button. Yeah. So it's actually a functioning game, but you can imagine the pretending doing laser tag. So it's a co-located shooting each other experience. But you can imagine just like kids on a playground just doing pew pew pew. Oh, there's a shield, reflect. I got firepower. No, I got water power. And suddenly you're like, oh, I should put water power in my game. And you didn't have to write any code. It took like 5 minutes, and it was fun. Okay, so I actually want to talk about flexible architecture of building stuff because I spend all my day in Unity, like writing a bit of code, add code. But I really enjoy that. Good for time. Wow. Shouldn't be too much longer. Okay. Oh, the timer started late. That's like first time really. So if you have flexibility, you can make changes mid-flight in your prototype. You don't have to get to the end of the iteration to make your learnings, to chuck them in the next iteration. You can just do things as you go. Like in this example, I have a test bed, just like a testing scene for doing the train track stuff. I got the same tool, the same like cylinder object, It's just one little game object. I just dragged it in, dropped it in the scene, and all it had to care about was like which way the camera is pointing. Do I take a mouse click? I didn't have to hook it up to a player. I didn't have to have game context. And suddenly you could just be playing with like putting tracks around. That's pretty quick. When I write the code for these things, I think about as if they were like an instruction manual, that they have an API, they have things you can do to them. Like for the track, all you care about is adding points or removing points. The code on the inside can handle that however it wants. And you can change spline packages. I could, when removing a point, like separate them. I can make sure some curves in there or something. But the tool on the outside doesn't care about what's happening on the inside. It's just like add point, remove point. So also game asset setup rather than just C# asset. There were some good notes earlier about composition, but also this is sort of inheritance. Inheritance is using variables and nested prefabs is using composition, I suppose. You'll see in a minute. But it's a good way to change behavior and have it propagate to all your other assets. And this setup in Unity at least doesn't take hardly any extra effort. It's totally worth doing. Like as soon as I know I'm going to do like 2 different objects that are similar, I just start doing prefabs, nested prefabs. So in VR, the first thing you're going to do is like pick something up. It's like you want anything to happen, you got to pick it up. Okay, so there's like a million components that have a VR interactable. Like how do you hover it, and does it snap, and does it? I don't know. There's so many. So I have a base object that is basically invisible, and then I make a variation which has like a mesh and some collision for decoration, and then a variation of that is like what if it has a collision with the ground, and a variation of something else is like what if you pull the trigger. And then once you have that all set up, what if I want to change the gravity for all the objects on my game? I can just tune the little base thing. Or what if I want to add networking? I drop a little networking component on the base. Everything suddenly will spawn in other clients, but won't behave until you add the extra code. But maybe if you want to change the snap behavior, or like collision sounds is another way of like composition. If you've got a collision sound prefab, you can sort of just drop it in, and suddenly everything has collision sounds. Tuning variables is a good way during runtime. Just have any significant variables tunable. Because you get free iterations, like the flexibility I talked about earlier. And I find just like, as soon as I'm typing in a number in a script, throw it in a field. I hardly ever hard code any values, because at least the first time is going to be wrong, so you might as well have it tunable. A pattern you can do in Unity and other game engines is have like a common fig file, which is text or JSON or whatever. But hooking that up through in a prototype is usually like way more work than it's worth. Just go like the manual labor way of just adding all these extra fields. Don't worry about it. And actually, if you have all your prefabs variants set up right, the values will like propagate where it's relevant anyway, usually. So if you want your iterations to go faster, you want to be working faster. So just a bunch of random recommendations. Watch out for micro interruptions anytime there's code compiling or hitting play mode. Unity is really bad for this. Unreal's pretty good at getting into play mode. But notifications, just anything, and Slack unreads, anything will slow down. Those are the worst for me, Slack unreads. They just look at you going, read me. Multiplayer slows it down like crazy. Ideally, you don't want to be having to do a build anytime you make a change, because builds extremely long. And to that end, you don't really want to be doing dedicated server if you don't have to. You want like a host where you're hosting on the client you're playing on. When you enter play, you want to be able to automatically spin up other clients and have them all connect without having to do anything extra. That'll save a lot of time, but multiplayer development is really slow. Just finding the change that you've made in the game can take time. So it's really helpful to have test beds where you just have your feature right there, you just put it in and you press play and it's right there. Or if you can't do that, at least having like skip menus or debug features for just teleporting to where you need to go. Traps that I often fall into myself. Don't overinvest in building tools. I heard some of these things, like sort of premature optimization we heard earlier. There's probably already a tool in the editor looking at you right in front of you, and you're like, I don't like that tool, I don't want to use you. You're a bit crap. But you know what? It'll probably work. It's a bit slow, it's a bit annoying, but it's a lot cheaper and a lot faster to do it for this prototype. And even the design, everything will probably change by the end of the prototype. So what are you even building your own tools for? And like manual labor of having to fill in a million fields sucks, but it's quicker often for a prototype at least. Because like it's easy to fall on the trap of building tools because writing code is fun. Everybody coders like to write code. I like to write code now. I've learned, and it's satisfying, but it's not what the game's about. You're here to make a fun game. Who is having fun, the developer or the player? Says Sydney. So nearly at the end here, playtesting the prototype. Just remember who the customer is for. It's going to be rough. It's going to be lumpy. So this is not for like the end users. Don't put this onto your Discord channel necessarily unless you've been doing it from the start, intentionally. It won't have a tutorial. It won't have any UI that will tell you what to do. So maybe just some documentation of like what buttons to press at the very least. Otherwise, people are just like clicking on every button. Like, how do I do anything? Maybe a little bit of storytelling to at least get them into the context of like what is the intention here. Like tell them what to look out for. But of course, you don't want to poison your testing situation by telling them too much. How well did it answer your question? What did we learn? Do you want to keep anything? And then throw it all in the bin. Because you're going to get ready for the next iteration. And maybe you can save a couple of little pieces. You can extract a little bit of code, take some videos, make a build, so you can archive that, and throw it in the trash. It's a happy little dumpster. You know what I mean? Thank you. Questions? Okay, questions. Oh, very awake at the end of this evening. I won't be heard. There's no questions. But anyways, I love to talk to people afterwards, so please just come up and chat. Yeah. Anyone? Question?
How often does have you taken stuff from the prototype and that managed to get all the way to the end?
That's a good question. There was a good example for Rimworld from Tyne and Sylvester, where he had like 5 prototypes, and each prototype he would take something through, and that's how like the people look the way they do. That's why there's base building, like he would take each one through. But I guess it's dependent on who the designer is. Yeah, most of my stuff I throw almost everything away. Yeah, it's really sad. It's cleansing. It's nice cleanse.
In my head, how long do you guys get to prototype? Is it for like specific customer contracts?
Yeah, our team in New Zealand, there's 10 of us or so, and right now we have like a contract. You just have to get your milestones, so you have to be doing prototyping at the start, and you're trying to get through, so you don't get as many iterations as you're going to like. But it's been a big company, so it's sort of been protected from the churn or like the really big products. So we just spend a lot of time just prototyping. Yeah.
So when working in a team, how do you have any tips on how to convince people to be okay with you throwing away stuff before that?
Yeah. I guess like you need to know is it okay to convince other people that it's okay to throw away stuff in the prototype. Yeah, I guess you need to say up front like what this whole situation is. It's not like you're starting the draft of the game. It's going to be a prototype. To find something out, and maybe you put it off in a separate project, or it's a special branch at the end, and you don't even give them access or something. People that's sort of the way things are with games, I think, often. So, yeah.
I know it's context dependent based on the design questions at the start of the process, but are there any common themes in the types of things you'd like to measure when you're doing the playtesting?
So what do I like to measure when playtesting? Yeah, I guess it's totally prototype dependent. I don't know, are they engaging? How well is everything functioning? Are they doing the kinds of things that you want them, that you're trying to incentivize them to do? Are they getting stuck on things? Yeah, I suppose it's different because some of these examples are like game feel, how is it feeling, or is it fun, and they're trying to get, the reward structure you've set up, are they doing that thing? So sort of depending on the goals of the prototype, yeah.
sorry for a second question. Do you ever find that when you're prototyping, you do a massive pivot using the prototype?
Yeah. Even like the very first time, like thing you start writing something down and doing a very first test, and like, well, that's not going to work at all. Let's just don't start from scratch all over again. Yeah. I mean, that's sort of the whole point, is to be very like flexible, so you can make these big changes midway through, and it's sort of the joy of it, to shy away from that. Because, like I said, games are tricky. Games are complicated. The rules you set up, you don't know how they're going to play out. So, of course, it's going to be what you don't expect.
How long do you usually spend on a prototype? Presumably less time, you'd be less sort of attached to it.
Yeah, how long do we spend on prototypes? Probably 2 weeks is like the minimum. But it can be up to like 4 weeks. Can be longer. Sometimes prototypes get a bit like confused and it becomes the project, and you just actually spill onto it and you get to the end. You're like, wow, okay, I guess we just get going.
So when you do a prototype, kind of similar to another question, but how do you evaluate the results? Is it like internal testing, or do you test with users? How do you make that call?
Yeah, how do we evaluate with internal other testers? I mean, share around with the team, try and get everybody to play. Be like, you've almost like seen them to build and be like, watch them and be like, are you playing this? Because they'll be like, they just don't want it. They want to do their own work. It's sort of, they're trying to have to work for you. But what was it? It was like, what was the question?
So I guess, do you use external testers, or is it all internal? And then how do you make a final decision around like, this is good?
It's usually just a feel for myself. The quite internal prototypes, just really rough. And often most of the products are not even selling to the shop, these ones. So it's not like we have to please end user customers and get really good results and tests. So it's usually just, it's the feedback from the team rough. Here's the changes, I'll go through that now.
How much would something like scope creep impact prototyping? Like, would sorry.
Yeah, more scope is more time. More time is less loops, so maybe less better game. Like you totally want to add more stuff as you're going for sure. I think it's you just get used to it as a designer of knowing what's relevant, what's not. To have to make that cut and then saying no more. Okay, that's probably good. Thank you, everybody.